Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Carmen Holmes with Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity, and we are so excited to welcome you to this discussion. As you experience today's discussion, we do hope that the information will compel you to take action and get involved in your local discussion around affordable housing and how our city can positively influence the supply, preservation of affordable housing while ensuring that families have access to credit and that all communities are included in these opportunities. Dallas Habitat serves 100% low to moderate income families with homebuyer counseling, new home construction, neighborhood empowerment, and advocacy efforts. We provide financial and homebuyer education for over 300 families annually and build nearly 50 affordable homes every year. So we are committed to this process. We are committed to this conversation, and we're thrilled that you're here to join us. Please do place your questions in the chat throughout today's conversation, and we will do our best to answer these questions at the end of the panel discussion. We do have our moderator moderating the chat, and so they are going to be cataloging those questions and working to get those answered for us at the end of the discussion. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Carly Ruff, who is the Director of State and Local Relations for Habitat for Humanity International. Carly is the Director of State and Local Relations. She is located in Washington, D.C. in the Advocacy Office. In her role, she works to build the public policy knowledge and capacity for Habitat for Humanity organizations across the U.S. to improve housing policy and systems at the state and local level. Carly has over 15 years of experience working in the affordable housing sector, so she is a great resource. She formerly worked as the policy director for the North Carolina Housing Coalition, and she served as the organization's chief lobbyist at the North Carolina General Assembly. She has facilitated the development of state legislative and regulatory policy positions, addressing the needs across the housing continuum. She has served on the board of directors for Habitat for Humanity of Wake County and the Association of Housing Counselors of the Carolinas. Carly began her career as an AmeriCorps volunteer, serving with Habitat affiliates in Charlotte and Richmond. Carly holds a BA in history from the University of Georgia and a Master of Social Work from Washington University in St. Louis. So as you can see, Carly is going to be a terrific resource for us today. She's going to share a little bit about the Cost of Home program, and then she's going to be back to help us answer some questions at the end of the discussion. Carly, take it away.
Thanks so much, Carmen, and hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be with you today. As Carmen mentioned, I'm the Director of State and Local Relations at Habitat for Humanity International. And as many of you know, in 2019, Habitat launched our first ever national advocacy campaign, Cost of Home, to address home affordability and stability through policy and systems change. Cost of Home has two key goals. By the end of the 5-year campaign, we have a goal to see 10 million people with improved home affordability through policy and systems change at all levels of government, and to have at least 200 Habitat affiliates conducting effective, sustainable advocacy. And I'm happy to say that more than 400 Habitat organizations are enrolled and active in the advocacy campaign as of today. And I'm thrilled to say that Habitat Dallas has been an active part of the campaign from the get-go. At Habitat, we know that no family should spend more than 30% of their income on a home. But consider that even before the pandemic, more than 18 million households were paying half or more of their income on a place to live. And now in the wake of COVID, the number of families struggling to make ends meet is only growing, especially given the tremendous supply constraints on the housing market. We know there's no singular policy solution that will solve the housing affordability challenges that exist. And we know that solutions are going to have to come from all levels of government with engagement from a variety of stakeholders like you. So Cost of Home was designed to leverage Habitat's greatest strength, our network of affiliates across the country. It's a collection of campaigning activities happening in Dallas, in Houston, in College Station, at the state level, and in communities across the nation. And this is combined with work that Habitat International is leading at the federal level. Through Cost of Home's policy platform, we also have 4 policy sub-theme focus areas to help us meet our impact goal and make this work a bit more tangible. So through the Cost of Home campaign, We all aim to improve home affordability by influencing policies and systems that will improve and promote, first, increasing the supply and preservation of affordable homes. Many areas across the US are facing shortages of adequate homes, particularly ones affordable to those earning modest incomes. And that's what this conversation is all about today. The campaign supports advocacy for policies that enable the production and preservation of homes affordable to lower income households. So for example, in Minnesota, Habitat Twin Cities worked in coalition with other organizations throughout the city to advocate for increased overall funding for affordable housing and substantial increases to the Minneapolis Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Many affiliates, Habitat affiliates across the country, are working to ensure there's dedicated funding in their communities for housing, and several are, as we speak, advocating to make sure local funding from the American Rescue Plan is used to support housing needs. Our second policy area is equitably increasing access to credit. We know mortgage credit is difficult, if not impossible, for many households to access. Cost of Home supports advocacy for policies that increase and broaden access to credit for underserved populations. So for example, Habitat Colorado just last year, along with affiliates across the state, successfully championed a bill that created a pilot program to expand the factors that go into an individual's credit score, to include rental payments. Thin credit files are a major barrier to accessing homeownership opportunities, especially for communities of color. So this was a great step forward. Our third policy area through Cost of Home is optimizing land use for affordable homes. Land is often among one of the greatest costs encountered in developing homes, whether for rental or for ownership. And when development does occur, land use decisions are often made without the full impact of or full input of impacted residents, sometimes leading to displacement. The campaign supports advocacy for policies that empower residents to guide local development and land use decisions to ensure that they fully reflect the community needs, particularly for populations who have been discriminated against in the past. So for instance, in places like Montgomery County, Maryland, where our Habitat affiliate has been advocating, they've been able to advocate for expanded use and lower restrictions for the development of accessory dwelling units, which are also called granny flats, basement apartments, to gently expand density in their community. And the last policy area is ensuring access to and the development of communities of opportunity. For families to achieve long-term success and stability, homes must be both well-constructed to ensure safety, quality, and energy costs, and also built in areas with sufficient access to transit, jobs, education, and other critical services. Cost of Home supports advocacy for policies that allow neighborhoods and communities to thrive. So for instance, in this area, our Habitat affiliate in Omaha, Nebraska, realized that many of their future home buyers who were currently renters were living in substandard rental housing that was impacting their health and the health of their families. So they advocated for the establishment of a policy for rental inspections to ensure additional protections for renters. These 4 policy areas provide an overarching view of the types of policy areas that our Habitat affiliates are engaged in, and has really set the direction for Cost of Home. I can say that as of today, we're just over halfway through the campaign, and through the advocacy work of affiliates and their partners, Cost of Home has impacted over 6 million people across the country. We are so grateful for Habitat Dallas's work and their role in this process. And I am so excited to hear the conversation today and all the solutions you all discussed. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Carmen.
Thanks, Carly. As I mentioned before, we are in very good hands. We have a wealth of information, a wealth of resources today. So I encourage you each to take full advantage of the opportunity to ask really great questions. And they're already starting in the chat. So just another shameless plug, please place your questions in the chat and we will catalog those and work to get them answered at the end of the discussion. So I want to thank a few folks who have planned to tune in today. If you're on the line, please know that we're really thrilled that you're here. From the City of Dallas Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization Department, David Nagara, who is the director. From the City of Dallas Planning and Urban Design Department, thank you to the team members who are on the call today. From Council Member Adam McGough's office, Priscilla Chambliss, thank you very much for being here. Dallas City Council Member Kara Mendelson, thank you, from District 12, thank you for being here. Dallas City Council Member from District 3, Casey Thomas, thank you so much for being here. Dallas County Commissioner, from Dr. Teresa Daniels' office, thank you so much to your team for being here. And to Carrie Mitchell from the Dallas Free Press, thank you so much for being here. So if you're on the call today, please know that you're welcome. Any of our city, county, state leaders, we just appreciate you being a part of this conversation. Thank you so much. So it is now my pleasure to introduce my friend, and I've worked with Lindsay in the past, and she is terrific. I like to call her the catalyst. She is just a woman who gets things done and has a great time, brings a lot of energy with her. Lindsay Billingsley is the founder of Lab Strategies, where she develops strategic initiatives designed to enhance financial and philanthropic outcomes for individuals and organizations. Lindsay developed her expertise through board leadership, civic involvement, and from chairing multiple record-breaking, and I do mean record-breaking, charitable events. Prior to founding Lab Strategies, Lindsay had a noteworthy 15-year career in the Dallas commercial real estate industry. She was named DCEO's Magazine Top 30 Under 30 and received Dallas Business Journal's Heavy Hitter Award. I'm telling you, this girl, she brings it. She's a graduate of both the Dallas Regional Chamber's Leadership Dallas and the Real Estate Council's Associate Leadership Council, and serves on the boards of Dallas Housing Authority, Dallas 24-Hour Club, Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas, and Teach for America, and United to Learn. She previously served on the boards of KIP, Public Schools, DFW, Nexus Recovery Center, the Da Vinci School, and the Real Estate Council Foundation. Her accolades are numerous and too many to mention, but we are thrilled that she's here to moderate our discussion today. So Lindsay, please take it away. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you, Carmen. I appreciate your kind introduction and really value all the work that Habitat for Humanity does to protect and build affordable housing stock in the city of Dallas. Let me tell you that I am just so honored to be the moderator today. As Carmen mentioned, prior to founding Lab Strategies, I spent 15 years specializing in multifamily land acquisition and development. And during my time at Alliance Residential, I worked with the city of Dallas to successfully incorporate the 10% affordable housing component that included vouchers on a new development at Knox Street and US 75. So when the mayor called me to ask me to be a commissioner on the Dallas Housing Authority, I was beyond pumped. I feel like this is at the corner of Main and Main for me and aligns my passion with my skill set. Without further ado, I would love to introduce our esteemed panelists today. We are so lucky to have three experts in urban planning, public policy, and the real estate industry who will share concrete ways Dallas can combat housing prices. First, we have with us Maddie Jones, who is director in the Affordable Housing and Community Development Practice at Coates Rose Law Firm in the Dallas office. Licensed in Texas and Mississippi, she assists developers with tax credits and bond financing, community development, and legislative matters in several states. She also assists developers with strategy, consents, and transactional closings for workforce housing, historic rehabs, 4% and 9% low-income housing tax credit transactions, and commercial endeavors. She also assists her clients in the public and private ventures, including use of RAD and special financing. She is the former general counsel and former senior VP, COO of the Dallas Housing Authority, and volunteers service on several civic boards and associations, including Dallas Assembly, Dallas Historical Society Director, At Last Director, Grace Fort Goldsby Scholarship Foundation Director, and TREC as the 2021 to 2022 PAC Chair. Next, we have Julia Ryan, who is the Director of Planning and Urban Design for the City of Dallas. She is responsible for integrating equity and empathy into land use policy. She has over 15 years of public sector planning and implementation experience and has worked relentlessly to champion policy reform, support neighborhoods, equitable distribution of funding, and strategic planning. Julia is driven by the philosophy to leave the world a better place than she found it. We need more Julias. Finally, Phil Crone is the executive officer of Dallas Builders Association. Phil began working for the Dallas Builders Association in 2006 and serves as the focal point for the Dallas Builders Association's advocacy efforts. He has helped ensure a better business environment for home builders and developers by working with elected officials on the numerous regulatory, permitting, and environmental issues that impact the industry at the local, state, and national levels. Thank you all so much for being here. For those of you watching at home, we would love for you to continue using the chat. And also, when this event is over, I would love for you to consider thinking about adding Habitat for Humanity to the organizations to which you give and are philanthropically involved with, because they are doing great work. So, Phil, I would like to dive into the panel and start with you. Let's start with some insights into the single-family housing and home ownership market. How would you characterize the state of affordable housing in Dallas?
Well, thanks, Lindsay, and thanks to Habitat for having me here. I, without exaggeration, will say that the state of affordable housing in Dallas is a crisis state right now. If you don't remember anything else that I say today in terms of numbers and some of the facts and the dynamics of this industry, just remember this, and it comes from the Texas A&M Real Estate Center, that for every $1,000 you increase the price of a home, of a new home, you price out 20,000 Texas families from the opportunity to afford that home. And it doesn't matter how that price increase manifests. It could be a product increase, it could be a permit delay, it could be anything, but those are the numbers and that's who's affected, and it's pretty significant. I think you're muted there, Lindsay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, with the median home prices in North Texas jumping 22% year over year, do you believe that the bubble will burst, or we continue to see this type of price escalation?
It's interesting because I keep hearing a bubble be thrown around as a way to describe the market, and that kind of harkens back to 2008 and 2009, where it was a completely different dynamic in the housing market. That was back when pretty much you could fog up a mirror and get a mortgage, and we had a lot more housing supply available, and once the mortgage market had that inflection point, we ended up being oversupplied. Well, now we're at the other end of the spectrum and we're completely undersupplied. We don't have enough to go around. So basic supply and demand economics are driving a lot of the challenges that we have now. Despite the fact that we built as a region 60,000 new homes this past year. The last time we did that was probably back in that 2008, 2009 timeframe, but we've added 1 million people since then in the Metroplex. So just rattling off a few numbers of what's driving some of these increases. Lumber has nearly tripled since the pandemic hit. It's adding $19,000 on average to the starting price of a new home. Appliances, you have to get them a year in advance. HVAC standards have changed. Those are hard to get. Lighting fixtures, attic foil windows. We're just playing whack-a-mole with all sorts of different commodity increases, and that's what's driving this, along with the demand and the inability to meet the supply, despite how hard we're trying as an industry.
That is so interesting. It doesn't sound like it's going to slow down anytime soon with the number of people moving to Dallas, which is obviously a catch-22, great for the Dallas economy, but very hard for affordable housing. I have a question of my own. How do you see construction costs? Do you think they're going to stabilize? And also, how do you see interest rates? I just saw an article today that interest rates are at an all-time high since 2009. What impact will that have on homes?
Yeah, I think there are a couple challenges still with the materials world right now. One is, while on one hand, I'm hearing builders say, hey, it's getting less bad, which we'll take right now as a positive. But on the other hand, there are a lot of components that everybody uses, not just the housing industry, that are coming from China, and the zero COVID strategy that they're pursuing, at least for the time being, and the lockdowns over there are going to reverberate through the market. Not to mention the Russian atrocity in the Ukraine and what that's done to oil prices and gas prices. So PVC, and also just transporting materials there. But I think there's going to be, and I say this optimistically, some more stability on that side of things. But at the same time, as you mentioned, the interest rates going up, those are a big wild card. We know that they're going to, we don't know how much. A lot of this, it plays into the numbers that I mentioned before, with the $1,000 pricing 20,000 Texas families out. For each of those families, when they're priced out, that's their bubble. It's burst. So we are seeing that on an individual level, and that's obviously a big concern. But a lot of, my last point on the interest rates is psychological. There was a study that was done about a month ago that said that millennials, my generation, they feel like 5% is a normal interest rate. So if we go past, then maybe they'll think that maybe it's not a good time to buy, and they'll go back on the sidelines. The older, wiser folks that have seen the ups and downs in the market and probably remember the double-digit interest rates and those back in the 80s will know that these things are cyclical, and they feel that 8 or 9% is a more normal interest rate. So we're going to see that play out here certainly throughout the rest of the year. I just hope for some stability, because it's been a wild ride for 2 years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Phil. So Maddie, you're up next. What trends are you seeing working with your clients and in your capacity as PAC chair for the Real Estate Council in Dallas?
Well, hello. I'm excited to be here with new friends and old friends. So there is a little bit of background I think might be helpful. I think someone mentioned, either your field, that the price of single family homes has gone up, 22-ish%, but also there's an increase in the rental market. So you'll see rents are up almost 20%. And the average rental is $1,500 in the Dallas area. And it's, very high and rising, and it's a concern. And I think that's the backdrop of why we see the trends that we'll chat about today. And also, I think a good background comment to make is, when you look at the number of units that are affordable, available for a family of 4 at or below 80 AMI, you're going to find very little in the city of Dallas area. And of those that we do find, they're south of 30. So the trend is that developers are trying to, along with stakeholders and policy leaders, which I tip my hat to our policy leaders and elected officials who are working hard to come up with solutions. And what we're finding is that developers, the trend is they're trying to find ways to utilize the tools we have to have positive outcomes. And so you're going to see the trend in trying to utilize the Public Facility Corporation statute, where you can have 50% of those units at market and 50% at 80 AMI or lower, or below 80 AMI. You're going to see an increase, a continued increase in the utilization of the low-income housing tax credit. That is with 4% and 9%, the 4% with the bonds, which you can build more units and raise more capital to have what is very contemporary housing. And the one thesis I would say is that we need more product, diverse incomes all over Dallas. So if you don't remember anything else I shared today in our conversation, we need more product all over Dallas with diverse incomes. So the trend is they're trying to see how to get product on the ground in very thoughtful, equitable ways all over the region. That's the trend.
Thank you so much for that trend. In our last board meeting for the Dallas Housing Authority, we actually had to take a vote on that exact thing. You know, HUD actually gives a set amount of money for the residents, and with rising apartment rents, where we could service 20,000 vouchers, just below 20,000 in the 19,000 range. With the increased rents, we can only service 16,000 now. So have you seen that?
Yeah, it's all over the country. Essentially, the voucher, for instance, if that family is a voucher holder, it has just so much value. And then you have to go into a market where that family may or may not have enough on their voucher based on their income to access that market. And so then you look at, okay, what other tools do we have, not just for those that are clients of the Housing Authority, but just the Dallas and North Texas population. So when the units are higher and the amount of money is lower, or that the units are available or being used by new citizens, then the product is not adequate to service the need. And so I applaud your willingness to serve. You know, that is exciting. And we're so proud that you are being a thoughtful leader in that space and just digging deeper and learning more about how it all works. Back to the engagement comment, I think earlier.
Well, as Phil said, it's a housing crisis. So I don't think any of us could sit on the sidelines. So I'm grateful for all the work each of you are doing as well. Okay, Julia, you're up. We got to get you going here. Okay. How do these industry insights compare to the city of Dallas's view for our housing market?
Yeah, and that's a sad, I think, question to answer, because I think what's ending up happening is that our neighborhoods are starting to feel the squeeze, our middle and lower income neighborhoods. And so we're seeing a lot of tear downs. We're seeing encroachment into these areas with, people who are trying to build new houses. And so what we end up seeing is that because we don't have any land available that's zoned for residential, that you have to go through a zoning process, there's infrastructure, there's a lot of things that go into actually being able to build a structure, so that end goal. And so because there's not really much of that land left that's really easy to build, we're seeing that encroachment into the neighborhoods, our established neighborhoods. And so absolutely seeing the same crisis, that there's just such an insatiable demand for new housing that it is taking a toll on our existing neighborhoods.
As the city of Dallas is currently working through its Forward Dallas comprehensive land use update, can you share with our audience what exactly that means and how future land use planning can open locations for appropriate residential densities and zoning?
Absolutely. And I think this process is absolutely key to being able to unlock some of this housing issues. So Forward Dallas is a comprehensive plan. Every city does a comprehensive plan. It's basically a look out 20 years on how we want the city to look. Often it comes with a lot of different policies that are related, such as transportation and housing and other things like that. Our plan is specifically focused on future land use. And so what's interesting is that the city doesn't have a citywide future land use map that shows where we want uh, land uses to develop and what kinds of general densities we want. And so that causes a problem because we don't know where we want to put our infrastructure. How wide does the road need to be? How much infrastructure in terms of the water capacity do we need? Water and sewer. There's a lot of things that go into those sort of forecasting measures that we're not able to take advantage of because we don't have that citywide future land use map. It's also important because we don't know what and where these affordable housing units need to be, and not just affordable, but any kind of housing unit. So it ends up going into the zoning process. You know, we do have zoning, but without future land use, it doesn't really have as much of an impact because what you may end up with is incompatible land uses because you're doing everything one off. There's not that strategic vision for what we need to do. So where are you putting those housing resources? What does it look like? What kind of density does it look like? And understanding where that growth needs to happen and where you need to fill in with your existing units to be able to accommodate that growth. So it's a really important process that we need to be able to complete in order to sort of unlock this problem.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your work there. And Maddie and Phil, what would you like to see Forward Dallas accomplish?
Well, I'll go first, Phil. And basically, we need more infill housing. We want, hopefully, to see a more equitable land use plan and an appreciation of what's needed so that there are essentially the entire citizenry gets to have access to amenities that we all want. We all want safe schools. We want good schools. We want safe communities. We want amenities, retail, commercial, playgrounds where we live, work, and play. And so if we can look at this land use plan in a way that is inclusive, we've got some opportunities in some parts of town, which I think looking at the housing policy or some of our target areas. And I'll pick on the Valley View area. That is a beautiful open slate to do some creative stuff and include affordable units in the nice new shiny comprehensive stuff. And that I think will give access. So hopefully we can see as an industry how to be more inclusive and equitable. And infill housing would be one of the things I think we should add to the agenda. And I know Julia and Phil have thoughts on that from home building and from just a planning standpoint.
Yeah, I want to build on what Maddie was talking about there. I think what we need to do is more than anything, and what we're coming up against in this challenge we're having with permit delays in the city, is that our zoning is so complicated in the city, and we need to step back and understand that not only the complexities of zoning are adding to the uncertainty and the affordability challenges, but you look back and you see what the history of zoning is in this city and in cities all across the South in terms of how discriminatory it's been and how discriminatory it still is in terms of how it affects the numbers that I had mentioned before, who disproportionately price out families and communities of color. I think if we add some simplicity and we add really, I think, a situation where we can build smaller single family homes, we can build some things that will develop areas without displacing residents. There is a huge interest in the home builder community to be able to do that just from a business perspective, let alone an equitable perspective. The less expensive your home is, the more potential customers you have. And there are a lot of builders that would love to get under the price points that they're able to get right now. And we have some cities in the suburbs that that just don't want that, and that have established residents that feel like their neighborhood achieved absolute perfection the moment they arrived, and they want everything to be more expensive. We have a lot of that pops up in Dallas on rezoning. And I think collectively we need to be the voice of the YIMBY movement, yes in my backyard, where these projects make sense. And that's my hope, is that this Forward Dallas plan serves as a catalyst for that conversation and lets those voices rise up. And then also, maybe on a separate parallel track, look at simplifying the zoning processes to meet those ends.
Mhm.
That's awesome. I love your bold explanation of how we got where we are and what we can do to make it better. So I would like to ask the full panel, is there any low-hanging fruit that you see as incremental changes that could lead to major improvements in our housing market?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and go. So Phil talked about the complexities of the zoning code, and that is definitely something that is on our radar. So we are looking at doing a complete redo of our development code, so it is more easy to use for both the public and also our developers and our permitting staff, our staff that are actively moving these things through, because we know that, you know, the more time that it takes to move through the process, the more expensive it's going to be. And it doesn't need to be that way. And so one of the things that, you know, I'd like to look at through this process is to reduce a lot of the prescriptive nature of the zoning, so that you know, we don't have to do customized zoning through PDs, that there are more opportunities to be flexible within an existing zoning category, to move more to by right zoning, include things like missing middle zoning categories, so that there's some gentle density within there. So within that category, you can build a single family or a duplex or a triplex or something like that. We also need to look at parking. I know that can be an exciting and spicy topic sometimes to talk about, but parking does increase the cost of these units. And so especially if you're talking about multifamily and a garage, that can really shoot up the cost of the rent and can price people out of simple housing. So something about, you know, it could add up to $350 a month for rent, depending on the circumstances of that kind of garage situation. So if it's underground, obviously it's going to cost more. And then finally, you know, around our transit stations, providing again that more by right development, so that there is density. We can move through projects quicker, and building in density bonuses and things like that for more affordable housing.
Right. I will echo the parking. You know, 100 years ago, I was on ZOAC, and parking was a hot topic. And I think it's getting some traction now. And, you know, some of the studies and definitely some of the work we're doing at TREC, we have, you know, a whole committee focused on parking, to just kind of appreciate where we can be more thoughtful from a business standpoint and from a use standpoint, from just a customer going out to a restaurant or having to park or having an affordable housing option because of the parking requirements. Not everybody uses cars, and I think some of it's a little, not only antiquated, but a little dated, Julia. I think we agree on that. Some low-hanging fruits also could be looking at alternative building methods. I think that's been talked about a little bit. And also, let's just take advantage of the time that we're now actually talking more, I guess, purposely about these issues. Let's don't lose this opportunity when we have, you know, council paying attention to this. We've got, you know, different stakeholders paying attention to these issues. This is the time to really make some headway. Yes, in my backyard, but we've got NIMBY, and we're going to have NIMBY in areas where we think you wouldn't. Okay. So we've got to embrace these boards and committees that have the ability to advance having some of these high quality products all over the city, so that we can take advantage of the capital markets. And those capital markets, Lindsay, I think the low hanging fruit is that people want to invest in Dallas. but we got to be receptive to that capital and not, run them off. And that is going to benefit everybody. So that's the low hanging fruit, is be nimble and act.
I've got two items with low hanging fruit. And the first one, I think we'll pick up Fred's question at the top of the program about running out of land and some of these tracks here. Dallas really has an ace in the hole with its shared access development program and standard. There are a lot of tracks out there that through that program, and not to get into the weeds of it, it allows for a lot more flexibility. One of these things, it could be attached product or detached product, and it'll have private streets, and where it interfaces with public infrastructure is where we get a lot of complexity right now for those projects. I'll give you one example. Over in East Dallas, there's one on, it's 8 homes on 1.7 acres. These are all net zero homes that contribute more electricity back to the grid than they pull. That was intended to be a $400,000 per home development, and it's now an $800,000 per home development because there was no checklist, there was no guidance on how to get through there. In fact, I sat through a meeting where 3 different city departments argued for 90 minutes over where the water meter would go on projects like that. So I think if we find a little bit more clarity and a little bit more certainty on how we can go after some of those projects, then we're going to find ourselves in a successful situation. And then the other one is, as I alluded to before, we've got to fix this permitting mess in the city. I know, and I'm not going to get into why it is. I'm just going to say that it is, and that it's right now 10 to 12 weeks to wait to get a single family building permit. You just can't do business in an environment like that. It disproportionately impacts exactly the kind of housing that we're talking about, and also small businesses. For example, for every day, it's $250 to $300 per day per project for somebody to sit around and wait for a building permit. And when you're a small family business, or even on the commercial side, you're trying to open a business, that's just not going to happen as easily as it should in Dallas. And it should be easier in Dallas than every other city. And I hope we can get through that soon.
That's great. Thank you so much for that low-hanging fruit. So I'm actually going to invite Carly Ruff back on. She's going to join us for our Q&A. Welcome back, Carly. Okay, so I have a couple audience questions, and we're going to try and get through as many as we can. This one is a great question, actually. My husband was just asking me about this a few nights ago. Dallas is running out of land on which to build on which to build traditional subdivisions. Is more dense housing an option? Apartments, duplex, fourplex, 0 lot line, 2 stories. Seems like a lot of small tracts around town are available where this might be an option. I actually believe there's a major metroplex who just changed all of their single family zoning into duplex zoning. One of you might know which city that was, but this is a great question.
Yeah, I think that may have been Minneapolis,
Yes.
potentially. There's been a lot of cities that have been moving towards that just because of the issues with affordability, but also the ability to serve residents in a more efficient way. So the more density you have, the easier it is to provide city services. That is on the table for what we're looking at with Forward Dallas, but it all comes down to what is right for the city of Dallas, and if we can do that. I think definitely looking at zoning categories that are inclusive of all of those kinds of housing options that you can pick and choose from. I think is a way to do that may be more strategic, at least for Dallas. Maybe start small and get bigger. Sometimes we have the propensity to go too big and then fail. So it's sometimes good to take a more measured approach. That may be what we look at. So definitely all those options are on the table with both Forward Dallas and the development code update.
Yeah, I know as Julia mentioned, they're acutely aware of this through the Forward Dallas process. But as I mentioned on shared access, we've got tools in the toolbox. We just need to sharpen them and use them a little bit more efficiently and effectively. Interestingly enough, on the council agenda for the 11th is a tiny home provision to make sure that those are recognized in the code, and there's some energy code type of things that need to be done with those as well. So we're already looking at that. There's some tools out there, and there's definitely a lot of willingness in the industry to provide that product, a more diverse product.
Yeah, and I would just add that across the country, about 75% of residential land is off limits to duplexes or townhomes. So the vast majority of residential land is only available to single family development. So it's definitely an area we need to be thinking about across the country, and a lot of communities are. And one thing I would just add for Habitat is that just up the street from where I am here in DC in Maryland, our affiliate there has been working on a demonstration project to take a single family home and split it into duplexes. And they're inviting the community to watch the project happen. And it's in a historically single family neighborhood, but to see what that is like and what it turns out like to help the community become more comfortable with the gentle density increases.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll move to our next question, which is really important one with the disparity of wealth and what we're talking about, people that have probably saved up and fought for so long to get actual ownership of a home, some maybe of our Habitat residents, and then they get in their home and year after year, property taxes continue to rise. Do you have any insight into, policy about that, or is there any way to protect them or protest? I know that this is a tough one, but obviously it really makes an impact on that monthly bill that keeps coming through after they fought so hard to get their homes.
Right. There are some ideas floating around the country on how to do that. People use the term gentrification, and there's some models that are being discussed in some arenas about how to not price out families because of that. And I do believe there was at least one bill, maybe more, that was filed in the last legislative session that goes toward the idea of putting a cap on property taxes for those that have been in the community for a period of time, that would allow development, redevelopment, and not price people out or cause them to lose their homes. So I think we should endeavor to see what those models are, best practices, and maybe put that amongst the list of things to explore as we're coming up with all these new opportunities.
Awesome. I think that's obviously very important. This one is a tough question that I know has been, discussed and tried to be worked out, and a lot of brainstorming has gone on around it, but it's a question about racial equity. Phil, you spoke to it. Do people of color still have a harder time getting financing for these homes? And if so, how can we work with them and give them every opportunity that anyone else would have?
Well, I'll go just because I'll go first. The history's there. If you haven't read the book, Color of Law, you need to pick it up and you need to read it. Don't just go and look at the clip online, read the book. It is so insightful and educational to understand how policy has driven how we do business in the country, and it's not too foreign to other parts of the world. So once you get an appreciation of, oh, that's why that is, then that will at least ignite, hopefully, the intellect to appreciate the problem and then understand it's not just a broken record of, brown and Black people are treated differently. It truly is policy driven in so many ways that rolls up to business decisions. So I think if we then look at just on the mortgage side, just understanding what are the protocols, are there any distinctions that are based on redlining or what have you, and then just start tackling them into a new platform, because yes, it is harder. That's why we have some of the things still in place with CRA and other things that will encourage investment on certain product by certain criteria. And Julia, I know this is part of your work and others. So, but that is, I think, understanding the phenomenon and then willingness to see how can we, peel back the onion and come up with some real helpful things.
I actually would love to see another panel, if you guys would be interested, on the history of Dallas and the redlining and I-30's placement and how it marginalized a number of people, specifically of color, in our community. So I think educating on everyone on this history would really help us to learn how to move forward in a more positive manner while having empathy and compassion for lives that were given vastly different opportunities than me, of course, particularly. Okay, I have another question. What kind of shared equity programs are in development or have been successful in the city of Dallas?
Can you expand a little bit more on the shared equity?
Maybe that's like public-private partnerships. I don't know. This question was just given to me, but I could imagine that let's consider it from a institutional developer teaming up with a voucher holder or, a public-private type scenario. Have those been successful? And how can we add on to those or modify them if need be?
So I don't want to speak for our housing department, but I think that as it relates to land use, identifying the locations in which those kinds of partnerships would be useful. So if we need to look at more affordable housing in North Dallas, for example, that's what we would look at through that future land use component, so that we were able to provide those resources to the communities that needed it.
Yeah, and I'll just speak not to Dallas, but just overall across the country, and Habitat's work with shared equity programs. And the way we see it is, that can come in the form of deed restrictions, that can come in the form of community land trusts and other kind of non-traditional ways of looking at homeownership and balancing the issue of affordability, long-term affordability, with building wealth and equity. And we're at this kind of point where, we at Habitat are thinking about, is it for some folks who buy a home at a certain time and then the value of their home goes up so much, it becomes it's amazing. And it's almost like winning the lottery, in some places, but that's not true for everyone. So how do you balance the wealth building with the long-term affordability? So a home that isn't just affordable for one family when they buy it, but that it would be affordable to those in the future. So there's a variety of different options out there of how to do that, where home buyers can still build wealth, but that it's at a scale that still allows a home to remain affordable over time. So there's a great organization called the Grounded Solutions Network that provides lots and lots of information on different options for that.
Okay, and I now have a little bit of clarity on that question. The shared equity is a deed restriction that is on some properties. And I think the question was also, does that reduce market value of homes to have that deed restriction?
Well, I would say it would restrict the amount that you could resell the home at. And that's part of the purpose, is to ensure longer term affordability. But I'm sure others can speak to that as well.
Great response. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I'm committed to having another session on this history of Dallas education, if any of you would like to join me. But I want to get Carmen back on with Habitat for Humanity and thank her so much again for putting this together and for having us. And I'd also like to add that Habitat is a key stakeholder in protecting housing affordability in the city of Dallas. So if they're not on your list of organizations you and your company support, they should be. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you so much. And first and foremost, thank you to each of our panelists. Thank you for your time today. Gosh, bringing your expertise, your knowledge, your thought leadership to this discussion. Dallas Habitat for Humanity, as we mentioned, is committed to serving low to moderate income families. I put a few statistics in the chat about who we serve and how we serve them. And we are committed to just bringing all of the voices together to make sure that we're serving the largest number of families that we can possibly serve. And I appreciate each of you for the way that you're ensuring that that happens in your scope of work. So thank you so much for being here. Lindsay, Phil, Julia, Maddie, Carly, thank you for your time. And thank you all for your questions. Really robust discussion. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to peel back the layers, find out where the pain points are and work to resolve those. So thank you so much for your questions. We will work to answer your questions in the follow-up email and send that out on Monday. Also, the recorded presentation will be available on our website, and we will send that out as a link also to all of the registered participants, those who could join us today, who could attend, and also those who were not able to attend. So thank you again for just being here. I would say please get involved in your local discussion. That is the #1 way to achieve a better outcome for all of these hot points that we're talking about. Get involved in your local discussion, speak to your council members, speak to TREC, speak to Forward Dallas, speak to Dallas Habitat for Humanity. I want to thank Brian Toney, who's not on camera, but he is a partner with Dallas Habitat with BGT Strategies. So he's helping with our advocacy work here in Dallas. So thank you very much to Brian. Thanks to Liz, who is also not on camera, but she is the Wizard of Oz behind the scenes. We appreciate her professionalism and just her ability to work all things magic. So thank you very much. And thank you to each of you for being a part of this discussion. Again, watch for that video link on Monday. You can also view it on our website. Get involved. Text to give. If you want to give to our advocacy work, please consider doing that. We've got an opportunity for you to do that. But we are all going to be a part of the solution together as we move forward in this discussion. So let's keep having it. And Lindsay, I welcome your invitation to have another discussion. I think we could talk for hours about this and really just scratch the surface. So thank you so much to each of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, please reach out if you have any questions for us, for Dallas Area Habitat. Reach out to us on the website. If you're interested in home ownership or know someone who is, again, please visit our website, and there's a quick questionnaire that can tell you how to move forward with that process. DallasAreaHabitat.org. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and to all of our attendees, thank you for your time.